You're welcome back to this particular video. In this video, we'll be talking about functions, right? So permit me to basically quote some of these things out. I really don't need them, so let me use the multi-line quotes for it. I will say asterisk here and another asterisk here too as well. So I'll just slow down now. Then right here, I'll leave a single line quote and I'll say function, right? So functions. So in programming language, there is this concept called function. Let me make it singular. There is this concept called function, and what exactly do function allow us to do? So function allow us to write some piece of code that carries out a particular action, right? Or that carries out a particular functionality. That is why probably they named it function. So if I have to define function in my own words, I will say that functions, that they are block of codes that carries out a certain action, right? So I want to define it like this. Actually, that's what a function is. But now in most programming language, JavaScript alike, we have like two types of function that you want to bother yourself with, right? So we have like the custom functions, right? And we have the inbuilt function. I would have started with the inbuilt function first, actually. Inbuilt function. I'll explain the difference between the inbuilt function and custom functions. Now, let me start with the inbuilt function. Inbuilt functions are functions that the programming language originally have. And in some cases, you hear people, instead of using the word function, they use the word method. So in other words, method and function, they are practically the same thing, right? So if you hear people use the word method, or in bracket now, or let me say in bracket and let me say method, right? It's basically the same thing in most programming language and JavaScript alike. Now, inbuilt function are function that comes with the programming language itself, while custom function are the functions that you as the programmer you will create as you are writing that particular code or working on that particular code, right? So inbuilt function, let me repeat, comes with the programming language. It's like comes alongside with the programming language, right? And the programming language understands that particular function, while our custom functions are the ones that we create. Now, unknown to us, we have actually treated one particular inbuilt function. What was that inbuilt function? The function called alerts, right? This function called alert is actually an inbuilt function, right? So with an inbuilt function, we don't need to call them. We don't need to create them because it has already been created and it is buried inside the programming language. So all we just need to do is to call them and use them. So basically knowing their use cases and use them whenever we want to use them. Like for example, the alert function that we used earlier on is an inbuilt function, and this alert function allows us to display something to the user, to flash a dialog or what we call alert box to the user where the user can click OK. Now we have several other types of inbuilt function, like thousands and thousands of them. In fact, I don't think anybody will actually know the whole inbuilt function that JavaScript has, right? So as we proceed in this particular course, I'll be introducing more and more inbuilt function little by little in such a way that it will not get us overwhelmed at the end of the day, right? So, but one of the syntax about function that you want to know is how function have been written. Now, whenever you see function or method, they always have this parenthesis, right? Parenthesis like this, right? I always call them the argument brackets, but later on we'll understand what an argument is. But let's continue with trying to create a custom function. Now, I want us to create a custom function that will add two numbers for us, right? Two numbers. Now, this is the syntax when it comes to creating your own custom function. You write the keyword function, right? So when you write the keyword function, you give a space. So the next thing will be whatever name that you want to name your function. It could be SameB, it could be XYZ function, it could be anything. In this case, let's just call this one add, right? It's a custom function. I just choose to name it add. You can choose to name it anything that you want to name it, right? Then it follows with a parenthesis. Now this parenthesis is what we call the argument parenthesis, right? The argument bracket. Inside this particular bracket, anything that comes inside a function bracket while creating a function is called what? An argument. It's called what? An argument. So, and what we normally pass inside this argument is a variable that we intend to use inside the function. What we pass as an argument is a variable that we tend to use inside a function. So what exactly is an argument? An argument is a variable that we can use inside a function. So we pass it inside the parenthesis of the function. So after that we have what? Curly braces, right? So these curly braces allow us to create the block of code. Remember that we said that the function are what? They are block of codes. Like, so we can have like several lines of code, the another line of code, the another line of code, the another line of code. So these parentheses here, these curly braces allow us to actually do that, right? So let me delete this stuff I typed, right? To allow us to do that. But in this case, now we want to add two numbers. So in other words, I can create two arguments, right? So the function allows us to have a lot of argument as much as possible, right? But for now, let me not add any arguments. You can also create a function without adding an argument. So I'm going to do something like this. So once I have a function called add, I'm going to say, okay, variable, this is a variable number 1. Let us call it num1. Let it be equal to 5, right? Then let the second number and a variable number 2, let it be equal to 10, right? Then the result, let's say variable result, want to add the both number 1 plus number 2, right? So this gives this, of course, this simply means what we're trying to do here is a function that adds two numbers, right, at this particular point in time. And number 1 is 5, number 2 is 5, is 10. So number 2, we're expecting 15 at the end of the day. So now, but this function will not return anything. So a function must have, or in most cases, whatever thing that you want the function should output, the function should have at least one return keyword. Now note, a function cannot have two return keyword, right? It's not be possible. Once you return something, the function automatically breaks. So now a function, let me just type something here. I'll say a function, right, must have only one return keyword, right? So if you went to put two return keyword, it's not going to return anything. And if you did not use any return at all in that function, you're not going to see anything as well, right? And if you only two return keyword, it will return the first one, I will not return the second one. So now what we're going to do now, because that is what we want the output to be, that's why we use the return keyword. We will now say return result. You see that? We'll now say return result. I made a mistake. I didn't say return result. Amazing. So now this is us creating our custom function, right? This is us creating our custom function. Now, once you're done creating your function, the next thing I want to do is how do you use the function? And that is the concept we call calling the function. Okay, let me call this particular function. Now, for me to do this particular function, I just need to call it, right? I can call it and it could be anything. So now, but in this case, I want to console log the result of this particular function. But when I call it, so I'm going to say console.log add. Now, whenever I'm calling the function or trying to use the function, I will definitely include what? Those function parentheses to let JavaScript know that it's a function. Without including that parenthesis there, JavaScript at this particular point in time, this ES5 type of JavaScript that we're writing at this particular point in time, will or might not know that it is a function. Right, so I'm going to use that parenthesis to tell JavaScript that it is a function. Now, this tells you that even console log is also a function too, but console log is an inbuilt function, while our add here is a custom function. Now, this particular case in time, this add, whatever in console log is carrying is an argument to that console log. So once I have this now here, I can save it. So if I save this and I go back to our browser and I refresh, I'm going to see 15. You see the result, right? The result is 15. For example, now if I want to console log, I would have said something like let me concatenate this. Let me concatenate this and say the result is whatever thing. Let's use this word here. So we are going to see something now. The result is 15, which is amazing. The result is 15 because that is what we are actually logging inside of our console. There, the result is 15, right? That is because we have this number here. But as you can see, this particular function called add now does not have an argument, right? So we want to give it an argument. So instead of us adding this number, this variable number 1 and number 2 here, let's make it an argument instead, right? So I'm going to do something now. I'm going to take this. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to say let this be number 1, Control V, number 1, comma. So if you want to add more than one argument, to use the word, you use comma to separate your argument. Then number 2. Yeah, they will no longer need these 2 lines of code over here. So I'm going to delete that. So if I delete that and save it now, if I do this like this, now if I can log this now, it's going to say error because there is no argument I'm passing inside the add function. Let's try it out. If I refresh my code here and I'm going to say nah, not available, right? Nothing there. That is because there is no arguments for number 1 and number 2. So whenever I'm using this function, because it is like this and number 1, number 2 is used inside my code, I need to pass a value that is going to be for this number 1 and number 2 as an argument. Now, so the first number here is going to be 5, I will say comma, and the second number here is going to be 10. Now this simply means that this 5 has been assigned to number 1 and this 10 here has been assigned to number 2. So that is us making use of arguments inside of our function. So I'm going to save this now. So once I save this now, I will go back like this and I will refresh. So if I refresh, you're going to see the result is 15. So with this now, anytime I want to add 2 numbers, even though it's not 5 and 10, I just call the function add and give it any number. For example, I want to add 50 and what now? 50 and 20. So for example, if I save this now, that function will automatically always add those 2 numbers by giving me the result is 70, right? So I don't need to go back to this particular function code and start to do that over and over again. Now, this is just a simple function called add. So we can use this same concept to create complex functions to solve actual problems in our code, right? So as we proceed, we'll learn the use of how we can create other amazing functions as well, right? So that is how we use function inside of JavaScript. Thank you for watching this particular video. Okay, now before I conclude, there are another thing that we could do to function, for example, by assigning a default value to our functions, right? So we can choose to assign default values to our arguments. Sorry to say. Now, for me to do this, let me do something. Let me just hide this particular line, comment it out, and say, like, for example, now let's say our variable number 2 is equal to 10. That we give it 4, right? And I want this particular argument now to have just one argument, right? And you could see that if I did not pass any argument now, doing this, let me not do this. It's not what I'm supposed to do. This other one, let's take it to the top here. All right. So if I did not pass any argument here now, and I refresh my code here, I'm going to still get this now, which simply means there is an error, right? But if I want this particular number to have a default value of 5, for example, I will say equal to 5. Then I will save this now. So by me using this, assigning a value to this number in here, what I'm doing in here is actually assigning a default value to that particular argument, right? So if I go back and refresh my code now, I'm going to have 15. This is me without actually passing a value. But if I pass a value now like 10, right, that is, it is being assigned there. If I pass a value as 10, what happens now? Let's see what happens, right? You see, it picks 10 instead of 5. So that is how you can create default assign default value to an argument, right? So now if there is no any value assigned to that particular argument, it takes the value of 5. But if I assign a value, it gives it that exact value, right? So that is how we can assign default value to an argument. Now that is that about function that you need to know of. Thank you for watching this particular video. See you in the next video.